I was about to take a bite when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen discreetly. "Don't eat. Just trust me." Was from my mom sitting 3 seats away at the same table. My stomach clenched instantly. My husband, wearing a plastic smile, raised his glass. "Please enjoy." I didn't know what was happening yet, but I knew something was very, very wrong. It was the first time we were having dinner with his family since I got out of the hospital. 3 months earlier, I'd lost the baby after a complicated pregnancy. Between tests, bed rest, and being admitted, I lost nearly everything. Weight, hope, peace, and even so, his mother insisted on the dinner. "Time to gather the family and move on," she said. But now, with that message from my mom and all eyes on me, I felt anything but welcomed. My name is Jess. I'm 34 and this is my story. Before we continue, like and subscribe. It's a free way to support my work. That table with my father-in-law, brothers-in-law, and my husband's ex seated like she belonged there, my heart was racing. I realized this dinner was a setup to humiliate me. The ex smiled too much, touched him constantly, dropped subtle comments about their past. I wanted to get up and leave, but I felt frozen. That's when my mom mouthed the words, "There's something in your plate." I saw her messing with it. My husband's mother. The woman who hugged me in front of others, but called me weak behind my back. The one who blamed me for losing the baby because I wasn't strong enough. The woman who never accepted that he had chosen me. Now, she had put something in my food unless my stomach turned. I faked a smile and pretended to eat. I waited until everyone had served themselves and started eating. I didn't touch my plate. Instead, I started recording. I placed my phone between the glasses. Camera hidden, audio on. I needed proof. When everyone was distracted chatting, I gently pushed my plate forward. I looked at my mom. She knew. I knew, but we didn't know what exactly. I pretended to feel sick and ran to the bathroom. With a napkin, I wrapped a piece of the food and hid it in my purse. In the car, my mom didn't say a word. She just held my hand while I cried in silence. It wasn't just about the dinner. It was everything. Losing my child, the subtle contempt from his family, the quiet betrayals I was only just beginning to see. That night while he slept, I did something I usually wouldn't. I went to the computer. In his email, I found more than I expected. The messages between him and the ex were all there. Dates that matched my hospital stays. Comments about how I wouldn't last much longer. One line stuck in my head. "She'll give up soon." I didn't cry that night. Didn't leap. I just opened a new notebook and started writing. Name by name, action by action. This wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a game. And I was about to flip the board. The next morning, I made a call that would change everything. But what I heard on the other end made me. It was worse than I imagined. The investigator's voice was calm but firm. He said he already knew my name, that this wasn't the first complaint involving my husband's family. You're in danger. Don't eat anything that comes from that house." My blood ran cold. I asked what he knew, but he hesitated. "You need to gather evidence and fast because they've done this before." This wasn't just a tense family dinner anymore. It was a real threat to my life. I hung up and looked at myself. In the mirror. Hollow eyes, pale skin, an exhausted soul. That's what they wanted. To watch me slowly fall apart, isolate me, break me. His mother used sharp words masked as advice. My husband stayed out more and more. His ex acted like the house was hers. And me. After everything I'd been through, I was being treated like something disposable. Hatred formed quietly, deep, cold. I started moving like I was playing chess. I printed the messages between him and the ex. I made copies of the bank statements showing the transfers he made. To her, stuff I had just discovered. I saved audio clips of his mother's cruel comments. And I started hiding cameras around the house. No one suspected a thing because no one believed I had any strength left. The next day, my mother-in-law showed up unannounced with cookies and flowers. "To brighten your day, sweetheart." Her tone was sweet, but her eyes ice cold. She walked in, looked around, and asked, "Feeling better?" "Really?" I faked a smile. She offered to make tea. Let her. And while she stirred the cup in the kitchen, my camera recorded everything, right down to the exact moment she dropped something into the bottom of the mug calmly, like someone who'd done it before. I sent the video to the same investigator. Within 20 minutes, he replied. We have enough to open a formal investigation. For the first time I felt like I had control not over my pain but over their fate. That fed me. That night I cooked dinner myself. I invited everyone, his mother, my husband, his ex. I told them I wanted to make amends, that I was ready to move. They smiled, swallowed the lie as easily as they expected me to swallow theirs. But I knew exactly what I was doing. Every detail of the night was documented. Every word, every move saved. For later, for when the time was right. I poured wine, smiling. Cracked jokes. Acted relaxed, distracted. They laughed, thinking I was back to being fragile. You've always been too sensitive, Jess, his mother said with a loud laugh. I nodded and raised my glass. To truth and justice. They laughed. So did I. But inside me, the revenge was already in motion, and none of them had any clue what was coming. I'd been feeling weak for weeks, dizzy, nauseous, forgetful. But everyone said it was emotional, just part of grieving. Even I started to believe it. The investigator had the tea and cookies analyzed, and the news he gave me knocked the air out of my lungs. A week later, the investigator called. His voice was tenser than before. Mrs. Parker, the substance in the cookies and tea is indeed toxic. Low dosage, but with continuous exposure it can cause dizziness, fatigue, confusion. My heart stopped, he continued. You can't stay in that house any longer. I'm forwarding the materials to the prosecutor. In the meantime, make up an excuse and leave immediately. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was survival. Came up with quick plan. Told my husband my mom had fractured both arms in a bad fall and needed me indefinitely. I packed my bags, grabbed my laptop, hard drives, everything I could use to keep monitoring the house. He didn't even question it. Just said, if you want to stay longer, go ahead. Might be good for you. Cold, distant. I just smiled. And the next night, from a rented room, I accessed the cameras in my own house for the first time. I saw everything. His mom arriving the next day, snooping through the bedroom, the ex lounging on the couch like she owned the place. The two of them laughing, drinking wine from my cellar. I watched my husband playing my piano like the house was his, not ours. The pain cut deep, but it also fueled me. From that hiding place, exiled from my own life, I began writing it all down in detail. Every move they made was another piece on my revenge board. I filed an anonymous complaint to HR at his job, attaching the proof of suspicious payments made to the ex. Few days later, I heard he'd been placed on investigative leave. He thought it was just bad luck or jealous coworkers, but I knew his downfall had started and came from me. Calm, calculated, no fingerprints. His mother started feeling the heat too. The ethics board accepted the complaint. She'd have to appear at a formal hearing. Her colleagues at the hospital started keeping their distance. Her perfect matriarch image crumbled day by day, and she had no idea where the blows were coming from. Meanwhile, the ex received subpoenas for receiving funds from questionable sources. By one, the walls were closing in, and I didn't even have to raise my voice. A week later, I met with my sister-in-law, the only one in that family who seemed to have a conscience. She never got along with their mother. She was moving out of state and wanted to give me what she called the last piece of the puzzle. A flash drive with audio recording she secretly captured during a family lunch weeks earlier. And there it was, my husband saying, she's more useful alive than dead. But if she keeps getting in the way. The sentence just hung in the air. His mom murmured something. Ex. Laugh. That was the last straw. I sent the audio to the investigator, who immediately requested a meeting with the prosecutor. He advised me to keep my distance and remain completely silent. He said, we're going to bring this down with evidence, but only when the time is right. The next day I created a fake profile and posted an anonymous note in a local Facebook whistleblower group. No names, but with details only someone from the house would know. In less than an hour, the post had gone viral. And that same night, I received an anonymous message. When I read it, my knees nearly gave out. That afternoon I got a strange email. Unknown sender, no subject. I almost deleted it, but the first line grabbed me. You don't know me, but I was at the cafe behind your mother-in-law, your husband, and a blonde woman. I think you need to know what I heard. My whole body froze. Kept reading. The author described the entire conversation between the three of them as if no one was listening, but someone was, and they chose to warn me. The email said the conversation was about me, my recent behavior, and something about a document she needs to sign soon before she gets suspicious. The blonde, clearly the ex, asked what they'd do if I refused, and my mother-in-law replied, "We're already working on it." Her emotional state is hanging by a thread. The witness said they left that cafe unable to stay quiet, and that if I was in danger, I deserved to know. The cafe mentioned in the email was near where my husband worked. I checked the address, found a live security camera feed on Google Maps, and cross-checked the timestamp with his credit card records. It all lined up. Was real. There was no name signed at the bottom, just the sentence. If it were me, I'd want someone to say something too. It hurt. But it also gave me fire. With this new piece I sent everything to my lawyer. She took a deep breath as she read it and said, "You know, we already have enough for a formal complaint, but this story is still bleeding. If you want it to bleed slow, this is the moment." I agreed. Revenge had to stay controlled. But it was time to let it breathe. And that's how my next move was born. Turning my story into whispers echoing across town. I created an encrypted file with edited audio clips, transcripts, and message screenshots. I sent it to 3 local Facebook groups and signed with a caption, "She trusted them." They laughed. The rest, you need to hear to believe. In under 2 hours the post was already going viral, and I, watching from a distance, could see the fear growing in their eyes because now they knew someone was exposing them, but not. That night he called me. His tone was flat but nervous. "Jess, do you know what's going on?" I said I had no clue. That I was taking care of my mom, just like he suggested. "Someone's setting me. They're destroying me. You'd tell me if you knew anything, right?" I just said, "Maybe it's just the universe putting everyone in their rightful place." And I hung up. The crack in his voice was the first sound of defeat I'd heard. The next day, my lawyer called with even more disturbing news. "We just received an old medical file of yours. It came from an anonymous sender, and there's something off about it." Forwarded the document to me. It was in my name, dated 7 years earlier before I'd even met my husband. I didn't recognize the hospital, but the signature at the bottom stopped me cold. There was clear as day. Dr. Helen Parker, my mother-in-law's maiden name. A brief psychiatric treatment stamped observational conduct suggested. None of made sense. How could she have treated someone who wasn't even in her life yet? Or was she? Question started to eat away at me. And for the first time, I realized my revenge hadn't even started. I had no idea how deep the hole went. I sat frozen, staring at the signature. Dr. Helen Parker, my mother-in-law's maiden name. August 7th, 7 years ago. Diagnosis: emotional instability possible. Adjustment disorder. But I'd never been to that hospital. I would have remembered. And yet there was my name, my birth date, even my insurance number. It was official. And still I'd never been there, at least not willingly. I contacted the hospital using a fake name. Said I was a relative and needed more details about that old admission. The receptionist hesitated but confirmed the document existed in the system. Said the treatment was brief and discreet at the family's request. My blood ran cold. What family? Who could have authorized that before I even knew the man who'd become my husband? Or had I known him and just didn't remember? Called my mom that same day. Told her about the file. On the other end, silence long and heavy. And she exhaled. "Jess, there's something you don't know, and maybe we're never supposed to, but I think it's time." My head was spinning. She said that years ago, during my worst emotional phase, after a car accident, I'd been briefly hospitalized, and that one of the doctors on staff was a family acquaintance. Never known her name. My mom cried, said she trusted the doctor, thought it was just a precaution. But afterward everything disappeared. No bills, no reports, nothing. It was all very strange, but you seemed so much better after. I thought it was best to move on. Back then I'd been grieving something traumatic, and yes, I had a memory blackout for a few months. But was that really it, or had someone erased parts of my story? I went back to the file and checked the fine print. It was a marginal note with an acronym. APE Assessment of Parental Eligibility. My heart pounded. That file wasn't just about my health. It was a psychiatric report about my fitness to care for children. But in 2018, I wasn't even thinking about becoming a mother. Was that added later, or had someone been planning to interfere all along? This wasn't just family drama anymore. It was institutionalized manipulation. Sent the files to my lawyer. She was stunned. Said it was serious. If your mother-in-law used her professional access to create or manipulate psychiatric reports in order to discredit you, that qualifies as a federal crime. The case was getting bigger, heavier. I started to realize that my revenge wasn't just against a rotten family. It was against a woman who had used the system to erase me. Quietly for years, the district attorney's office was alerted. The investigator began working secretly with a new legal team. But I couldn't wait anymore. I started drafting a new complaint, still anonymous, now focused on the criminal misuse of medical records. I built a new digital dossier with everything. The file, Helen's background, manipulated documents. And for the first time I named names, initials, dates, locations. I knew the press would chase it. 3 days later, an investigative journalist messaged me. Short, direct. I need to speak with you. I know this doctor, and what she did to you wasn't the first time. My whole body broke out in chills. And when I picked up the phone, what she told me shattered everything I thought I knew about my past. Her voice was steady but heavy. She said she'd been investigating Helen Parker for years. She worked as a nurse but had ties with psychiatrists and private clinics, always involved in delicate cases of emotionally vulnerable women. My name popped up in a complaint cross-referenced with files from another victim. You're not the first, Jess, and maybe not the last. I couldn't breathe. According to the journalist, the other woman had been institutionalized against her will during a divorce. And guess who brokered the entire process with the hospital? Helen, the journalist continued. She seems to follow a pattern. Custody cases, inheritance battles, estate disputes, always siding with whoever wants to erase the woman. This wasn't just family drama. It was a modus operandi, and I had been carefully chosen from the start. She asked if I'd authorized the use of my documents for a full expose. Said the story was already in progress, but needed a current victim with solid proof. I thought for a moment and agreed, not just for revenge but because I knew that if I stayed quiet, she'd do to someone else what she did to me. I sent it all. Within 24 hours, the journalist had already cross-referenced my story with 2 other women. 3 different lives, one name, Helen Parker. Meanwhile, on their end, chaos was spreading. My husband's company officially suspended him. X was summoned to testify as a recipient of illicit funds. And the mother-in-law had vanished, gone from the house, the hospital, the social circles. No one knew where she was, but I did. She was hiding, waiting for the bomb to go off, and she had no idea how big of an explosion I was planning. I was called in for an official statement with the DA. I brought the original documents, medical reports, screenshots, audio files. The room fell dead silent during my account. When I said the name Helen Parker, one of the prosecutors said, "That woman's come up in other cases, always through third parties, never directly." That was about to change. She'd have to answer with name, face, and full history. As I left the hearing, I found an envelope stuck to my car's windshield. Heavy paper, no name. Inside, a clipping from an old newspaper. A photo of Helen smiling next to a doctor. On the back, handwritten, "She's destroyed entire families, but you could be the last." That confirmed everything. Someone else was helping me. Someone on the inside, and with every step I took, my revenge became more collective, more powerful, more inevitable. 3 days later, the expose went live. Headline: Nurse with ties to psychiatric clinics suspected of manipulating diagnosis to influence inheritance and legal cases. They didn't mention my name, but anyone who knew the family recognized it instantly. My husband's phone blew up. The ex deleted all her social media, and the mother-in-law didn't respond to a single journalist. But someone answered for her, and that was the scariest part. At midnight that same day, I got a call from a restricted number. The voice on the other end wasn't my mother-in-law's. It was a man's. And he said just one thing. You messed with people bigger than you realize. Be careful what comes next. Then silence. For the first time I felt real fear. But I also knew I'd gone too deep to back out now. The call put me on high alert. I knew Helen was dangerous, but I didn't think anyone would go so far as to threaten me for defending myself. I tightened my digital security, activated two-factor authentication on everything, scrubbed my online trail. I told my lawyer, who immediately contacted the investigator. He called me in for a meeting and said, "You're dealing with people who have connections, but you're more protected than you think." It was a strange balance, fear and power in equal measure. I went back over the documents collected. One detail caught my eye. A mailing address that appeared in two different victims' files. It belonged to a medical foundation apparently inactive. I googled the name and found only an old, outdated website. But on the contact page, I recognized one of the directors, the same doctor from the old photo with Helen. The pieces were starting to fit. I sent this new info to the journalist. She was stunned. Said if it checked out, the story would go national. The foundation had received millions in donations over the years. There was medical fraud tied to financial gain. It would be a scandal. And Helen was the silent link, the woman behind the scenes, using her position to manipulate records, destroy reputations, and protect heirs on the right side of the fight. Meanwhile, my husband was falling apart. He called me every day, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails. "Jess, you won. Okay, just stop. Life's over." His voice was that of a cornered man. But I knew it wasn't guilt. It was fear. Fear of being exposed. Fear of losing his privileges. He wasn't thinking about me. He never did. It was always about him. But now he had nowhere left to hide. My mother-in-law was still missing. But the investigation moved forward. The nursing board permanently suspended her license. The hospital launched an internal review. The foundation was notified. A reporter published a second piece featuring new victims. Women who, like me, had been forcibly diagnosed, discredited, and pushed out of their own homes. It wasn't just a family drama. It was a repeated pattern. And now, finally, it was coming to light. Even with all that, something still noted at me. The signature on my file, it wasn't digital. It was handwritten. And the handwriting matched another document I kept in my safe. The domestic partnership contract I'd signed with my husband before the wedding. Compared the two. It wasn't a coincidence. Same curve in the P, the same slant in the H. Dated me. Had signed a document drafted by her. I went back into my hard drive and pulled up the folder with our original wedding paperwork. And there it was, an earlier draft without the clause about separate property. That version was never filed. The signed one was the one that left me with nothing. I sat in silence for minutes, feeling my throat tighten. I'd been manipulated from the start. By him. By her, by all of them. My family drama had been scripted like a trap. But now, it was my turn to write the final act. That night I got a new email. No message, just an attachment. When I opened it, it was a photo taken outside the building I was staying in. That same day during sunset in the bottom corner. A line typed in red. "Are you alone now?" I stared at that photo for a long time. It was recent, taken from a car or a motorcycle or maybe even someone on foot. The phrase, "Are you alone now?" felt more like a taunt than a direct threat. But still, that camera click marked me as a target. And that's exactly why I decided to act before they did. My revenge wouldn't be derailed by a cheap psychological game. I had another card to play. I called my lawyer and asked her to begin the annulment process for the domestic partnership contract. I sent her the different versions of the document, the psychiatric reports, the handwriting analyses. She replied, "This could turn into a criminal case too. Falsification, contract fraud, emotional abuse. He's going to come out of this with less than he came in." And that's exactly what I wanted. Not just to expose them. I wanted to leave them with nothing. In parallel, I contacted a forensic handwriting expert. She reviewed the documents and confirmed. Same handwriting, same person. Mother-in-law's signature appears disguised as a witness, but she interfered in multiple sections. With that, we had the legal grounds to invalidate the contract. My lawyer smiled over the phone. You're not just keeping your rights, you're becoming the name on the case. And this time the family drama would carry my name on the record. That same night, I did something I'd been quietly planning. I uploaded all my evidence to a secure cloud. And I shared it with 2 independent journalists from different states. No face, no voice, just documents. Included 3 names: Helen Parker, Ethan Parker, and the ex-wife. Files were labeled by date, location, and record. There was no way to cover it up anymore. The truth was out and I was safe even if they tried to silence me. On their side, the signs of panic were clear. The ex deleted all her social media. My mother-in-law's phone was disconnected. And my husband tried reaching out to my mom. He said he was worried about my mental state. She answered with a sentence that brought me tears. Jess isn't crazy. She's just not quiet anymore. For the first time I felt my mom truly on my side, and it gave me new strength. The investigator gave me an update. Helen had been found in another state, staying at a distant cousin's house. She was trying to spin the story that she was the victim of defamation, but the reporter who'd been following the case was already on her way there. The prosecutor's office in that state had been alerted, and the victims were beginning to speak out publicly. It was the beginning of the fall, slow, painful, and way more devastating than a single scandal. The threat was still in the air. I got another message. This time by mail, an envelope with a single sheet of paper. On it, just one sentence. You're going to lose everything if you keep going. And in the footer, a name that made me shiver. A lawyer known for defending the dirty, the corrupt, the violent. Meant Helen still had allies and that the war was far from over. But I had something she didn't anymore. People. On the right side. The next morning I woke up to a phone notification. One of the folders in the cloud had been downloaded more than 20,000 times in under 6 hours. The truth was spreading, but along with it came another alert. Someone had tried to hack into my bank account. That wasn't a coincidence. They were trying to retaliate, but what they didn't know was that the next move was already underway, and it wasn't coming from me. The attempted bank hack made one thing clear. They were desperate and dangerous. But what came next was even more unexpected. I received an encrypted email with no identifiable sender. Inside was a single PDF attachment and one line. She destroyed my career, but not my memory. I opened the file and felt the weight of it before I even finished the first page. It was a full report signed by a former colleague of Helen's at the hospital where she worked. The author was a psychiatrist who had been dismissed years ago, falsely accused of unethical conduct. In the report he described how Helen falsified assessments, altered prescriptions, and suggested diagnosis to benefit relatives of influential patients. He had tried to report her at the time and was silenced, fired, erased, and now seeing my case gaining traction, he decided to speak. I didn't know his name, but I knew this man had just become the most valuable piece on my revenge board. I sent the report to my lawyer and the journalist. Both confirmed it was authentic. The content was damning. Included altered patient records, written instructions signed by Helen, and even an email exchange where she suggested temporarily sedating the patient to make signing the consent easier. The patient in that case was another woman, but the pattern was the same. This wasn't just family drama anymore. It was serial crime. Reporter published the 3rd article, this time with Helen Parker's full name and complete history. The impact was immediate. The piece spread across major outlets. The National Medical Board issued a statement. The hospital where she had worked said it was shocked and ashamed. The foundation's accounts were frozen for audit. And me, I stayed silent because my presence was more powerful when invisible. On the other side, my husband finally cracked. He called me in tears, begged for forgiveness, said he had no idea how far his mother's manipulations went, that he only got involved with the ex because he was weak, and that he was trapped between the two of them. I listened in silence, and at the end I just said, "You weren't trapped. You were comfortable." And I hung up because the pain he caused couldn't be erased by guilt. The justice I wanted would come. from somewhere else. With everything we'd gathered, my lawyer filed a joint action. Contract annulment, damages for emotional distress, and a request to freeze both his and his mother's assets. The judge granted the request. Immediately, within 72 hours, their accounts were frozen. The beach house they loved to flaunt was put up for sale in a panic, but it was too late. Helen's criminal record had been officially opened and their downfall was public. Still, the war wasn't over. Got a new threat, an extrajudicial notice accusing me of defamation signed by Helen's lawyer. My response was silent. Attached the medical report, the audio files, the screenshots, and submitted everything to the prosecutor's office. The investigator called me the same day. They tried to flip the game. Now we beat it up. And in that moment, I knew the last piece of the castle was about to fall. At the end of the day, I got a call from the reporter. She sounded tense. Said that during an interview with someone from Helen's past, she uncovered something that changed everything, something that didn't just involve manipulation but death, and that maybe my story wasn't just about personal revenge. Maybe it was about ending something that should have never started. The reporter spoke in a low voice, like she was afraid someone might be listening. The woman I interviewed was the niece of a patient who died in 2016. The case was filed as cardiac arrest. The victim had been admitted to a clinic where Helen worked as an external consultant. According to the niece, her aunt had just begun a contentious divorce and a large inheritance was involved. The doctor who signed the final prescription, Helen Parker. The reporter said the documents were weak, but the story felt familiar. Vague reports, generic diagnosis, same handwriting, same pattern. For the first time, the term forced euthanasia came up. There was no hard proof, but the patterns were too strong to ignore. Now, with public exposure, more people started to come forward. It was a horror structure carefully protected for decades. But I was tearing it down with evidence, strategy, and patience. The prosecutor's office ramped up the investigation. They started cross-referencing Helen's former patients with family litigation records. The overlaps were glaring. This woman had been manipulating the system for the benefit of others for years. She was the invisible villain behind countless family tragedies. And me, I was one of her last attempts to repeat the cycle. But with me, she failed because I fought back. The next morning, the investigator called. You'll need to testify in a public hearing. The DA wants you to be the face of this case. My stomach turned. I'd spent months trying not to be seen. My entire revenge had been carried out in silence. But now my presence could protect other women. For the first time, I felt it was fair to be seen. Not as a victim but as someone who survived what was meant to destroy her. At the hearing, I spoke with confidence. I told every detail, brought the documents, showed the differences between the contract versions, talked about the emotional manipulation, the falsified reports, the poison disguised as tea. As I left, I heard quiet applause from the audience. Some women were crying. One of them grabbed my arm and said, "She almost did this to me too." That broke me because now my pain had become a shield for others. 2 weeks later, Helen was officially indicted. They called it one of the most complex medical and financial manipulation schemes in recent years. My ex-husband lost every position of trust. The ex was charged with criminal conspiracy, and the foundation was dissolved by court order. Every piece fell just as I promised, but without saying a word too soon. Revenge was never loud. It was precise. I returned to my house alone. A house that was mine from the start, but that they tried to take from me. I redecorated everything, erased all traces of them, hung one new frame on the wall, a copy of the lawsuit with my name at the top. It was more than justice. It was proof that I survived, and that they'd never make me question my sanity again. My family drama had been bloody, quiet, and long, but it ended exactly where I wanted, with all of them beneath me. The following week, I received a letter with no sender. Delicate handwriting, white paper, just one line. I just wanted to be heard. It was from my sister-in-law, the only one brave enough to walk away before it all blew up. Kept the letter in my bedside drawer, and I never looked back. Because when you defeat monsters who use love as a weapon, the only real revenge is never returning to the cage. In the days after the conviction, the silence felt different. It wasn't fear anymore. It was a new beginning. The walls of my home felt like they were breathing with me. I opened the windows, painted the doors, changed the sheets. Small touches but symbolic. For the first time in years, I could walk through my house without remembering. Every poison disguised as routine. Revenge had cleared the ground, but rebuilding, that was a whole new battle. Learning how to live again was harder than planning their downfall because revenge gave me focus. Gave me purpose. Now I had freedom but also a mirror watching me all the time. Jess who survived wasn't the same woman who entered that marriage. I was someone else now. Tougher, sharper, less romantic but more myself. I started therapy. Slowly I realized that justice heals wounds but doesn't erase scars. My mom came closer again. Conversations, once strained, were now gentle. She apologized for the past, for being silent, for trusting the wrong people. She said she was proud that I hadn't lost my mind through all this. Told her I did lose it, just in a lucid way, and that's what saved me. Cried. So did I. Sometimes the biggest family drama is the silence between mother and daughter. We broke that. Together. The reporter reached out again. The article had been nominated for a national award, but she wanted to thank me for something else. For showing that not every revenge is loud, some are made of files, patience, and courage. She said more women came forward after my hearing, that some cases had been reopened, that the name Helen Parker, once feared, now caused nausea inside institutions, and that was more than I ever dreamed of. I started writing everything down, not to publish, just for me, so I wouldn't forget, so I'd never accept so little from anyone again. I turned my story into personal chapters. I wrote about the day I got the do not eat message, the day I was called unstable, the day I was almost erased from the world by a woman who thought she could toy with someone else's pain. And I wrote about the day I no longer needed revenge because it was already done. I got a message from my ex-sister-in-law. She had moved to another state with her newborn baby. Said she was naming the little girl Jess because you showed me what strength without shouting looks like. I cried for hours. It wasn't about glory or status. It was about knowing that my pain wasn't wasted. That someone who watched it all unfold understood there's life after abuse and justice after silence. Nights I still wake up startled. My body remembers what it felt like to be trapped in a hostile place. But now I get up, breathe, and remind myself. Got out. They tried to destroy me from the inside but ended up exposed from the outside. Revenge didn't turn me into a villain. It freed me from guilt. Because when we suffer in silence, the world calls us dramatic. When we speak, they call us crazy. But when we win, there's nothing left for them to say. Then one day the phone rang. Private number. A calm female voice said only, "You know me, but you don't know what I know." Before I could respond, she added, "Helen didn't do it alone," and hung up. That sentence, "Helen didn't do it alone," echoed in my head for days. I tried to remember voices, faces, people I overlooked while fighting to survive my own life. But nothing came until 2 days later. The reporter sent me an email. "You need to see this." Attached was a letter sent to the newspaper signed by a former financial director of the foundation, where Helen had worked as a consultant. The man claimed Helen never made decisions on her own, that there was always a man behind everything, a name that never appeared publicly, but was listed as the foundation's main donor, a retired attorney. The name Arthur Bellman. When I read it, my stomach flipped. Bellman had been the family lawyer on my father-in-law's side, and according to my mom, he was the one who helped with the brief hospitalization. I couldn't remember. I researched everything. His name came up discreetly in 3 other stories tied to Helen. Always in the background, always as a donor, legal advisor, or family representative. He never showed up in the scandals, but he was part of every structure. That's when it hit me. Helen was just a piece. Cold, cruel, the executive, but someone was funding it, covering for it, cleaning the trail. My revenge was nearly complete, but I hadn't found the source yet. I took the name to the DA's office. The investigator confirmed Bellman had come up in past complaints, but he'd always been shielded by reputation and connections. "We're drafting a formal request to break banking and communication confidentiality," he said. I asked, Will that be enough to arrest him? He replied, maybe, but it'll hurt more if it goes public before going legal. Smiled. For the first time I felt like this revenge wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to the whole system. I met with my attorney, told her I wanted to include Bellman in the lawsuit. She hesitated. He's powerful and dangerous. Then she smiled. You've taken down people bigger than your own pain. Let's do this. We began gathering everything. The records, the calls, the account traces, the foundations, every link between Bellman and my mother-in-law, the wrongful hospitalizations, the tampered inheritances. It was meticulous and bulletproof. While digging I found something that knocked the wind out of me. Bellman had signed off on the registry office that validated the final version of my marriage contract. He was listed as the technical verifier, meaning he knew about the scam from day one. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a project, a legal manipulation scheme, built with surgical precision, and I had fallen for it like so many others. But now I had the full map and I was turning every piece against him. I handed everything to the reporter. She published a new article. This time the title read, "The Man Behind Helen Parker: How a Shadow Lawyer Bankrolled the Country's Largest Emotional and Financial Manipulation Scheme." Arthur Bellman's name for the first time was front and center. And while he scrambled to block the article in court, I was at the courthouse signing the new petition. Jess Parker versus Arthur Bellman et al. This time his last name came after mine. That evening I got an envelope. Inside, a single sheet, a photo of Helen in court, scribbled on the back in pen. "You only got this far because I let you." And what came with it was an offshore bank account number with a transfer made by Bellman on the day I was institutionalized. That transfer was the final puzzle. The money came from an account under a shell company's name, sent directly to the clinic where I was held, against my will. Date 2 days before Helen signed the medical recommendation. Amount $20,000. Purpose: emergency agreement. I'd been bought off, silenced with paid sedatives, and now the one responsible had a name, a signature, and a social security number. Arthur Bellman. I turned the document over to the DA and waited. I knew from that moment the system would move fast, and it did. Bellman was summoned. Tried to hide behind lawyers, but the evidence was ironclad. Claimed he was just helping families in crisis. But the donations, his ties to Helen, the forged contracts, the money trail, it all led straight back to him. This time no one could protect him. The court accepted the full charges. Bellman was indicted not just in my case but in at least 6 others that surfaced after the expose. Some of the women hadn't even realized they were victims until they saw their stories mirrored in mine. And now together we formed a resistance. Silent, steady, unbreakable. Our shared pain became strength. And my revenge was no longer mine alone. As for my former in-laws, there wasn't much left. My ex-husband was trying to rebuild his image with hollow, self-pitying videos. His ex vanished. Helen was convicted, banned from any medical practice, and awaited criminal trial under house arrest. Me. I was rebuilding not on the ruins, but on what I'd never again allow them to take. My voice, my clarity, my truth. I was invited to one last interview. Symbolic. A year after the story broke, the journalist asked me, "Do you regret starting all of this?" I didn't hesitate. I regret waiting so long. Because deep down, every silenced woman carries an inner clock, counting the years she spent thinking she was weak, overreacting, unstable, when really she was just being poisoned by someone else's comfort. I came home after the interview, sat on my porch and closed my eyes. The sound of the wind brought me peace now. I didn't need applause or admiration. I just wanted my life clean, free, and it was, got a message. Bellman case was transferred to federal court. I smiled because it wasn't my battle anymore. It was the state picking up the war I began as a whisper that turned into a voiceless scream. Today I live in a beautiful home wrapped in quiet. The kind that comforts, not threatens. I've relearned how to eat without fear, sleep without triple locking the door, laugh out loud without looking over my shoulder. My life is whole and happy. Have good people around me. A network I built myself. Love came when I least expected it. I met someone kind, someone who's never Raised his voice but always hears me fully. Someone who didn't save me because I'd already done that, but who showed up to walk beside me, not to control me. He knows my story, every page, every pain. And still, or maybe because of that, he loves me gently. We plant flowers in the yard and grow a peace that once felt like fiction. If you like this story, like and subscribe. Well, click the video on the left and watch the next.